Think about the best athletes to play in your sport. How big of an impact do you think their parents had on their rise to the top? Were they destined for greatness no matter what? Or was their talent and skill already inside them, and they just needed the help of their parents to be molded into the elite athlete they turned out to be? Welcome to the Sports Psychology of. I'm Gabe Zellico. Today, we're talking about the sports psychology of parenting. What common obstacles do parents face as they guide a young athlete throughout their career? How can parents better manage that gut-wrenching feeling of watching their children lose and fail? What are fragile perfects, and how can parents avoid raising someone who's vulnerable to adversity? What are the pros and cons to participation trophies in youth sports? How can a parent stay composed on the sideline and not add to the stress their child is experiencing? To help me answer these questions today is Elliott Waksman, who is a certified consultant through the Association for Applied Sports Psychology and has consulted with professional organizations, NCAA teams, and thousands of athletes, including Olympians, professional athletes, and student athletes in youth sports, high school, and college. His time in the trenches with those high performers confirmed his philosophy that developing mental skills like resiliency, optimism, focus, and confidence helps everyone perform better, regardless of the stage. Elliott, based out of Portland, Oregon, has worked in the field of sport and performance psychology since 2010, helping individuals and groups boost their mental toughness. Timestamps are in the description. Enjoy. My question before we get into everything about parenting, and there's a lot, where does your love or appreciation for the mental side of sports come from?
Yeah, one of my favorite things, Gabe, is the stories we get to hear. So what I mean by that is every client has their own journey, their own story. And we're sitting here and we get to hear it. And there are times when clients share things with me that they've never said out loud before. And they really peel back all their chapters to their athletic career and their personal life. And just being able to hear stories all day is one of the most fun things about this job.
Yeah, it's awesome that this job can be so fun and rewarding at the same time. So that's why I love it. And that's why we're going to be two giddy sports psychology consultants talking about the sports psychology of parenting today. And this is a good time for a disclaimer. Each parent-child relationship is unique. This is general advice, so take it with that in mind of, hey, I'm going to look at this through the lens of my own relationship. So maybe not everything will apply to you and your child or children. But again, these are going to be general practices that are going to improve the relationship between parents and kids who play sport and help facilitate a strong mental game for their kids. So is there anything else you wanted to add, Elliott, before we get into it?
Yeah, great frame up, Gabe. I'll also piggyback that by saying, let's recognize and call out that parenting is really challenging.
Yeah.
My worn out joke that I share in my office is, what, the nurse didn't hand you the parenting manual at the hospital? There is no instruction manual here, folks, and there's no perfect formula here. Gabe and I are going to share some strategies that are definitely valuable and tools to add to your arsenal. But we also recognize that, hey, this is a tough challenge, and teens are tough. Youth student athletes are tough. We recognize that there'll be ups and downs. So let's not sugarcoat it. Let's accept the fact that this is a tough journey.
Yeah, mistakes are inevitable. Just for the
Absolutely.
athletes, for the athlete in their athletic career, they're going to mess up, they're going to fail. It's going to happen with parents too. I have a story about that with my own parents that we'll get to later on. But this is a good transition into the first topic I want to talk about, which is common obstacles that parents face as they have kids in athletics. Maybe their kid isn't trying to go pro necessarily, but they're just trying to enjoy their time in the sport. And let's talk about some common obstacles parents face in this process. And the first one I want to talk about that's kind of going off of that parents wanting to be perfect topic is, I think a lot of parents want to help as much as possible, help their kid have fun, be the best athlete they can be. However, they're not sure how to do that. This can easily create anxiety in the parent because they are always worried that they're not doing what's perfect or best for their kid. And now that's going to cause them to have some extra stress. So can you talk about maybe anything on your mind with that obstacle, wanting to help as much as possible, but not sure how to?
Yeah, great theme. And where my mind goes is it's very similar to the obstacle athletes and performers feel of wanting to be perfect and what is the expectation. So I guess where my mind goes, simply put, is being okay, being imperfect,
Mm-hmm.
and accepting life is not perfect. In fact, life is beautiful with imperfection. And I guess one of the takeaways for our listeners is accepting that parenting and our family dynamics are not going to be perfect can be a helpful reframe for us.
Yeah. And understanding that every other parent child relationship in this sport atmosphere is also imperfect. So my relationship doesn't have to be perfect because that's unrealistic. I think that's a good reminder because it can take that burden, that weight off of their shoulders when they realize they might not be making the perfect decision. Whereas, okay, this is going to happen. This is going to come up no matter what.
Yeah, totally. We're not always going to say the right thing. We're going to foul up our words.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be slip ups, there'll be ups and downs. Guess what? That's called life. That's called family life.
Another obstacle parents face is, and this is so natural, but they want to control more than they actually can. So this is the parent that might be determining where their kid practices, plays, the equipment they get, trying to coach them on the sideline during games. This makes so much sense because they're probably incredibly invested. What do you have to say, Elliott, to the parents who want to control more than they can? Maybe normalizing that for them or any tools they can take away for that right now.
Yeah, great question. I would tell parents the same thing I tell athletes every week in my office of control the controllable.
Mm-hmm.
We have to think about the boxes we can check, the boxes we do have power over. And as a parent, one of those boxes is unconditional love. We're on the sidelines, we're on the ride home, we're on the family dinner table. Let's check that box of love. Let's show our kids, hey, I'm here for you. I love you through the ups and downs. Whether you drop 30 points or zero, I'm still going to be here. We're still going to come home, have family dinner. I'm still going to hug you. And that is a controllable aspect of parenting.
So it seems like when the parent is inevitably in this game where they want to control more than they can, maybe reminding themselves, hey, I have influence in other places. I have influence on the car ride home, at the dinner table, on the way to practice, to and from. So all these other areas where they can remind themselves, okay, this isn't my moment, but I will have my own moments.
Absolutely. Well said. And those moments are incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So that is where the impact can happen. Those moments are really rich and important.
And yeah, and we're going to talk about some of that stuff a bit more of like those conversations focusing on control for their athletes as well. One thing I wanted to use this as a transition to another obstacle to talk about is when they try to check too many boxes. Parents are good at checking the parent's box. They're good, hopefully, at being the parent. However, a lot of parents might be wearing too many hats. And what this means is a kid might have an hour, 2 hours of practice where they're being coached by their coach, and then they start talking with their parents, who they are going to their parents for just that, the parent role, the parent hat. Yet the parent puts on the coaching hat now. I wanted to touch on this phenomenon of parents trying to be multiple roles and how that can influence the kid's relationship with the parent and maybe their love for the game.
Yeah, great prompt. Let me share a quick story, Gabe, of a coach up in the state of Washington. Let's call him Coach Sam. And Coach Sam shared a tip about what we're talking about that I want to pass along to our audience here. And when I heard it, I was like, wow, that's a game changer. That's beautiful. So here's the story. So Coach Sam is a youth baseball coach, and he wears that hat. And he's also a father. Okay. And I think a lot of our listeners can nod head along with this role, right? This tightrope to walk, so to speak. So Coach Sam pulled over his son, said, hey, Billy, you want to go to the field, play catch today? Okay, great. Hey, Billy, do you want dad or do you want coach? Asking them what role, what hat to put on. And Billy said, I just want dad right now. Okay, let's just play catch. There's no instruction. Let's just play catch, dad and son, and let's, love on him. Let's be present. Let's smile. Let's soak up this beautiful family moment. Okay. If Billy says, hey, I want to be coached right now, I choose coaching. Great. Then that's where you talk about where the elbow is, where the release point is, our hips are pointed forward. So give that choice up to the kiddo. Do you want coach right now or do you want dad right now?
I love that so much. And why I love that is, first of all, it's, I think, just a great practice. But second of all, that works perfectly as an example of what we're going to talk about later in managing burnout. So giving your kid some control over their experience in their sport. And yeah, giving them the option of like, all right, what are you up for today? Elliott, I want to ask you for the parents that, let's say they're Coach Sam and they're going to ask their kid that question, but they sense, man, they really need some training. They're not looking great, or maybe they're not happy with their play, yet they don't want to face like the coaching, the criticism when we're playing. So they keep saying, let's just play catch. I just want my dad. I don't want coach. Do you have anything to say to those parents who are like, oh man, I really want them to train though?
Yeah, for sure. And that's a tough obstacle to navigate. But let me throw this at you, Gabe. 80% of student athletes will drop out by age 13. So if the goal is for them to train and improve and grow, that tells me that your goal is also for them to continue to participate in their sport. How do we get them to continue? Well, we make them have fun. Mm-hmm. So researchers in our field examined why do student athletes play sports? And they listed a bunch of options for student athletes to pick from. Why do you play? Guess what the number one option was?
Sounds like fun. Yep.
Sounds like fun. There you go. So my point is, if they're not having fun, they're going to drop from the sport. So if you want your kiddos to improve, therefore they have to be around the sport. To get them to be around the sport, to stick around, you need to have fun. So those father-son catch moments, that is for the love of the game. That is the fun. And that's what's going to keep them in the sport.
Great point. And I also think that there's no reason to say, what were you calling him, Billy, the son in this example? There's no reason to say that Billy won't also be learning how to catch more effectively, how to hit with their body mechanics just subconsciously when they're just messing around, but they're actually learning. Or they might transition into this mindset of, okay, now I want coach dad because this is fun and I'm feeling confident in myself. And now I want to explore how to get better. So I love it. Great way to kind of wrap up that topic of wearing too many hats. So put it in their wheelhouse of like, all right, what hat do you want me to wear? The last obstacle I want to talk about that I think a lot of parents face is watching their kid fail or lose a game and all of the negative emotions that come with it. So they're watching basically, the suffering that comes with losing. One thing I will say on this is it's definitely difficult as a parent to watch that, I can imagine. However, those negative emotions that athlete is experiencing, your kid is experiencing, is very essential for skill development and maturity. I think sports are a very great vehicle for development and growth. And this is a prime example of how to deal with failure. So I think that's an important reminder that I can preface that obstacle with. Elliott, is there anything you want to add onto this, dealing with or watching their kid struggle with failure?
Yeah. Well said, Gabe. I'm nodding my head to everything you're saying. What wisdom, what a beautiful way to look at student athletics. I'll add this, and it's one of those moments for our listeners where I recognize easier said than done. But let me ask your listeners to think about this question. when do we want our kiddos to fail? At age 30? Or would you rather have them fail in Little League? And let's say they strike out. There's no monumental consequence. Let them fail in student athletics. What a perfect stage to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
And what a safe space to learn that valuable life lesson. The more failure they have, the more skill development they will learn, like you alluded to. And therefore, they won't be age 30 with poor skills and facing their first failure.
Yeah, there might be an argument for I want my kid to fail when they're young or in this part of their sporting career where the stakes are lower. You might be rooting for the failure because this is going to serve them well for the future. I love this term that I heard describing the athletes who I think a lot of them go pro, and those athletes are oftentimes the best in every league they're playing in until they get to the pros, where they're finally seeing equal competitors. And a phrase to describe these athletes are fragile perfects sometimes, because it's been perfect for them the whole entire way up until the pros. It's been perfect. They haven't dealt with any failure because they don't lose because they're so good. But now they're fragile. Now they don't have a foundation of a skill set to deal with this struggle of failing and losing and not being the best. So yeah, I think that's a good perspective shift, Elliott, of like cheering for them to lose and learn this lesson when the stakes are lower.
Love it. Say that phrase again, failure.
Fragile perfects.
Fragile perfects. I love
Yeah.
that phrase.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage our listeners, do you want a fragile perfect kiddo? How do you want to develop your kiddo, right?
Yeah. Looking ahead and being like, okay, thinking what's most valuable for their
Right,
development, for their life.
right.
Great point.
And that's a great framework to work off of as a parent. What a great lens to consider.
Yeah. Let's talk about unconditional love and how that can facilitate intrinsic motivation. So first off, what is unconditional love? This is love that doesn't hinge on the results of a game that their kid plays or even a test score or their behavior. So even if they're acting out, the parents can still exhibit their love for the kid. And what this does is the child always feels like they have a safety net, someone who loves them even when they slip up. Is there anything you want to add on that like definition?
No, that makes sense to me.
Do you want to explain what intrinsic motivation is, how we can notice that in children?
Sure. Um, my mind goes to the love of the game
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about intrinsic motivation. It's an inner fire, and you contrast that, Gabe, with extrinsic motivation. And when we think about extrinsic, we think about trophies or scholarships, maybe, or MVP awards,
Yeah.
things that are outside. And while there's arguments for both motivational sources, intrinsic and extrinsic, it is a safe argument to say intrinsic motivation, that inner fire, is more sustainable, more long lasting. And so if I were to err on a side, I think about intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, I agree. I think not only the longevity piece of intrinsic motivation, but also it's a healthier motivation, because when athletes are motivated to beat other people, to achieve status, achieve money, hardware, this can create a lot more tension because now there's uncontrollable factors at play of these other competitors, maybe contracts and negotiations they can't handle. However, it's also worth noting extrinsic motivation is so powerful. We're not saying that it doesn't help athletes be their best. I think a lot of Olympians become what they are because they want that gold medal. They want that status, the fame. But like you said, intrinsic motivation, it's clear that we can err on that being the safer of the two and something that we want to facilitate. There will always be both types of motivation in athletes, and we're talking about how we can tip the scales towards the healthier version. So yeah, intrinsic motivation is more about personal development, being better than I was yesterday. extrinsic is more about the external rewards, money, status, hardware. So let me ask you this, Elliott. How can unconditional love facilitate intrinsic motivation? And this is parents exhibiting unconditional love to their kids, and then the kids having a stronger sense of intrinsic motivation.
Yeah. One of the things that I think about, Gabe, is unconditional love, like you alluded to earlier, involves support and love through the ups and downs. So what do I mean by that? Are you only going to give your kiddo batting practice lessons after a poor season? Or are you going to give them extra resources and extra love in great seasons and poor seasons, right? What message are we sending? So one of the ideas I share with my parents of my clients is, let's show our love and let's give resources through the ups and downs. And that message we're sharing is, hey, Billy, I love you, and I'm right there with you. There's going to be some tough seasons. There's going to be some tough at-bats, and there's going to be some really lovely moments of success and wins. But I'm going to be there with you throughout both sides. And providing resources and being there through the ups and downs shows unconditional love.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think when you can be consistent, so you're not basing your behavior and I guess types of resources, rewards that you might be offering to your kid, when that's consistent, no matter the outcome of their games and seasons. That's a good way to show, hey, the love doesn't change based on how you're playing. And another set of, I guess, effects you might see in kids that can understand their parents love them unconditionally is they're going to be less afraid of failure because they're not afraid of their parents ripping into them after a game or just treating them differently because they didn't play well, or they're not going to be afraid of their parents walking out of their game mid game because they're not playing well. So being less afraid of failure, they're going to be more willing to take risks, which is going to expand their skill set, and look at that, expand increase their potential for success. And I mean, when you can manage fear of failure, you're doing something right. So I think this unconditional love has a big role in that.
Yeah, beautifully said. And you're talking about a theme that let's dig at a little bit here. The theme of putting our student athlete in position to be successful, right? All of these strategies we're talking about, this relief, this lower anxiety, this comfort, this freedom that we give our student athlete, guess what? That leads to performance.
Yeah.
So not only are we talking about well-adjusted kiddos, we're talking about ways to improve their performance. When I think of an athlete who plays free and plays for the love of the game and is comfortable and confident, yeah, I'm going to put my money on them to execute and to earn that varsity roster spot, to earn that scholarship, to earn the spot on the A team. Why? Because we set them up for success, and these parenting strategies set up our kiddos for success.
It's another great reason how parents can manage burnout in their kids. And I think a lot of parents are afraid of pushing their kids away from the sport. I've heard that from a lot of parents that I work with their kids as part of my clients, and they want them to stay in the sport. They want them to persevere. And one way that parents can do that is showing this unconditional love and having it not depend on the results, the behavior. So yeah, very important stuff. Okay, Elliott, I'm hoping you can inform a lot of the parents about some myths around scholarships.
Yeah, for sure. Let's dig into it. Myth number one, there's all this money out here for athletic scholarships at the college level. Guess what? Fact. The pot is much bigger for academic scholarships. If I'm a family and I want financial support and I'm looking for a scholarship, I'm going to put more eggs in the basket of going to school, getting good grades, do your studying. That's going to open up so many more doors for that young student athlete. And so the myth of, oh man, we really got to put in extra time on the court, on the field. Well, where are we spending our time? Where are we spending our energy? Is this statistically, Is this the right route to take? Look at the numbers. This is not a subjective opinion of mine. This is objective stats based on the pots of money at the college level. So when we look at the stats and we want to put our money in a more high probable position, let's put it in academics. If I'm a coach at the college level, what is the easiest way to get a student athlete? Good grades. If your kiddo earns good grades, that opens up so many more doors, and that is much easier to be aligned and get on that college roster spot. There's more wiggle room, so to speak, that the coach can bring in that athlete.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that the difference might be that large, where the money is a lot easier to access through academic scholarships. And where my mind goes to it, there are a lot of student athletes struggling with the balance of school and sport. So I imagine if parents can also have this focus on, hey, we're going to care about academics because that's also where scholarships are potentially accessible. If that means extra tutoring or extra resources in general, I imagine this could end up being a stress reliever for the kid, because now they're not struggling about making grades to stay on the team or just making grades good enough to go to the college that they want to. With that weight off their shoulders a little bit, if that's managed better, again, this goes back to the happier, healthier, and less stressed out kid is going to perform better than the counterpart who is more stressed out and struggling with the anxiety of test taking and homework all the time. So very interesting.
Yeah, well said, Gabe, totally. And I've said it before, if I'm going to put my money on an athlete, it's going to be that happy, healthy, well-adjusted, confident student athlete in terms of performance, right? I'm going to bet on them as opposed to the burnt out, anxious, high stress student athlete at the plate, right?
Yeah.
And as a parent, it's analogous, right? How can we set up our student athletes to be successful? And the classroom and the textbooks are number one. It opens a lot more doors.
Got it. Cool. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on in scholarship myth busting?
Yeah, this is a complicated idea, so I'll try and articulate it as best I can. The idea of both types of families, whether you are looking to reach that next level, an ultra type A competitive family, or you're that family who just wants your kiddo to participate and have fun. Both families will benefit from this idea of unconditional love and support. Why? Because it leads to sustained participation in the sport. Again, I said a moment ago, when we're burnt out, when we're not having fun, we're going to drop out, right? Then there's 0% chance of earning a college scholarship if you quit, right? So the recipe for success for both type A and the more recreational families is that love as the foundation, is the joy, the fun, emphasizing the process, emphasizing the life lessons, emphasizing what the fun aspects of sport are. Why? Because it sets up your kiddo for long-term success and continued participation in their sport, which then leads to them earning that next level spot.
Great point. I immediately started imagining an athlete who, through junior high and maybe the beginning of high school, shows so much promise, might be at the top of their class in their sport, but they become burnt out. And by their junior year, they're not even competing and they don't want to. And there's no scholarship for a sport in that regard. So especially if they have that foundation, yeah, just facilitate, foster that love for the game so that they can have that longevity that is necessary for the success and hopefully scholarships.
Yeah. If they quit at age 13, like 80% of their peers, guess what? When you quit, you don't get a scholarship.
Let's talk about a very fun topic, the participation trophy. I think there's pros and cons to the participation trophy, where every kid gets one, no matter how they did, how they performed. I think this is a lot more common in the younger athletes, so maybe not teenagers, but maybe it is still present there. But let's just bounce back and forth, Elliott. Pros and cons of the participation trophy. Let's start with the cons. Let's do that. So what immediately goes into your mind when you think of yeah, this participation trophy is bad because.
Yeah, interesting conversation. And Gabe, it's one of those, let's frame up this conversation of, you're right, there are different arguments, and you're going to hear different pros and cons. Maybe there isn't one perfect magic answer here.
Mhm.
I'll share my opinion, but again, we prefaced it at the start of the conversation. Every family is different, every teen is different. Let's take our points, our arguments with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But my initial reaction to answer your question is, we are rewarding participation. What behavior are we celebrating here? What in terms of behavior change and behavior modification, what does the reward speak to in terms of what we're promoting? So, okay, you get a trophy. That's your reward for playing sport? Is the trophy what we want to encourage?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to that beautiful emotion of teamwork and friendship and personal growth. I'd say that's a better reward.
The three things you mentioned there, like the personal growth, the teamwork, the friendships, those are all intangible. Yet the trophy is tangible. It's something physical. And I think that's what makes it more of a big deal, because you can look at it constantly. There's usually some little ceremony around it, and that makes it more of a big deal than the friendship, the teamwork, the learning to lose. And the word that comes into my mind as you talk about this is entitlement. Is it teaching kids to be entitled of, because what happens when they participate in another league that's a few years down the road and they don't get anything because they came in third place? Are they gonna have a much tougher time dealing with failure because they don't have any type of reward?
Yeah, good point. What are we setting up our kiddos to do? Are they going to throw a tantrum when they don't get that reward, that trophy, that hardware?
Mm-hmm.
What message are we sending? What life lessons are we encouraging?
I think it also can facilitate a sense of complacency where kids won't strive to compete their hardest and win at all costs because, well, I still get my trophy and that's what I'm playing for, because that's what we're signaling is important. And so when you facilitate this sense of complacency, it's might be sending mixed messages to these kids of saying, hey, I keep telling you that we appreciate your effort and the progress you're making towards your goals. However, we're also sending a message that these trophies are important. And now they're thinking, okay, well, I have a reason to not fulfill my potential because I'm receiving this type of reward. Anything to add on how this participation trophy facilitates complacency?
Yeah, Gabe, I want to share a story about trophies with a youth team I was coaching years ago. And when I say youth team, I mean second and third graders. So this was a wonderful soccer team in the Portland area. And I had the opportunity to coach these young people, teaching them life lessons, teaching them soccer skills, and also nutrition, healthy eating. And here's what I did, which led to a beautiful moment at the end of the season. And youth parents listening and wearing that coach's hat, please feel free to steal this idea. At the end of the season celebration party, rather than participation trophies, I shared different healthy foods. So what I mean by that is I had a brown paper bag at the front of the classroom, and each student athlete would walk up and receive their reward. The reward of an orange, an apple, wheat bread, banana, pineapple. And here's what happened, Gabe. They were so excited to earn this silly reward, and they were so curious what was going to come out of that brown bag. Everybody had smiles on their faces. Everybody was tuned in because they were so curious and so interested in what was going to come out of their bag. And they went back to their seats and they shared it with their friends and they talked about healthy foods. It reinforced the message. It wasn't a hardware participation trophy, and it just brought so much joy and so many smiles to that youth team. And it's so silly, right? But that's what kids love. Creativity, thinking outside the box. It's a great way to end the season.
And it sounds like, was it the food that you were rewarding them with was like unique to them and specific to them, and it had some meaning behind it rather than just like, hey, little Timmy, here's an orange for you. It's like, no, there's some type of meaning behind it.
Exactly. And that's a great opportunity to celebrate unique strengths. Exactly to your point. There's meaning behind it. And maybe add, as a coach, maybe add a story about why that fruit represents that athlete, or what hustle plays that athlete showed over the season and why they earned that fruit reward. It just was a lovely moment as a team. The parents were happy, the kiddos were happy. They lit up earning that fruit reward.
I think this is a cool example of something that I didn't think about when we talk about participation trophies. I kind of think of it as, are we giving the trophies to everybody or just the winners? But you're kind of creating this middle ground, this compromise of, hey, we're not going to give the losers trophies, but we're going to still recognize them in some way. And I think that's very valuable. So I love the story. That's great. I just imagine all these kids lighting up, seeing like a fruit come out of a bag and be like, yes, I got the apple.
You could hear a pin drop in that room. Their eyes were just locked into that brown paper bag. What's going to pop out of it
Yeah.
next?
Yeah. There's no surprise with trophies. It's all the same one, but this one, there's the unique factor, the surprise. Let's talk about the pros of participation trophies. One that comes to mind is it's going to facilitate a boost in self-esteem for the athlete, for the kids who don't have experience losing, and they might not want to play again because they lost, and they're looking at their peers receive trophies, wishing they had the same thing, and now they go to mom and dad and go, I don't want to play again. And having a participation trophy for these kids can keep them in the sport, to keep them learning these lessons that are important, and then eventually they can actually fulfill their potential, get the reward, maybe in that process experience the fruits of their labor. So anything to add, or any others you want to talk about the pros of participation trophies and self-esteem?
Yeah, I'm nodding along to your example. I love that. Well said. Um, Feeling proud of your efforts and seeing a trophy that represents your commitment and your sacrifice and your growth, that's a beautiful thing. That's perfectly understandable for young people. That's an emotion we want to celebrate. Yeah, I want young people to feel proud. Hell yeah.
What about promoting inclusivity? Maybe it's along the same lines of this, but again, for the kids who don't feel like they're included or feel like they're connected to everyone, can a participation trophy help them feel like they're a part of the sport, like they're contributing?
I think you can make an argument for that, yes. And here's why. The season ending party, right? All your little kiddos have trophies in their hand, and they're showing each other. They're huddled up right at the end of the field, and they're showing off their trophies, looking in little groups, looking at one another. That's inclusivity, right? That's belonging. That's community. That is your little tribe. And to have something that your friends have, to have that trophy, that hardware that all your friends have, and to be a part of a team, and to have a trophy that represents a united group, that's a beautiful thing too. And there's an argument there that participation trophies encourage belonging and community, and inclusivity.
And like we're going to talk about soon, that connection piece, when you're connected with your teammates, your friends, is big in fostering motivation. So great point there of how it can facilitate that sense of I'm connected to this sport, this community. Let's talk about something that I hold close to my heart as a goalie in hockey. I had a good view of the parents on the sidelines. So let's talk about best practices for parents as they watch their kids play in a game and they're just on the sidelines. This could be in the bleachers, up above the rink. This could be right on the sidelines of a soccer game, really any of that stuff. My go-to advice for parents is composure is key on the sideline. And why is this? It's because kids are very impressionable. It could be subconscious or it could be very obvious that they are taking after their parents. I'm sure you can imagine kids might be stressed, excited, at the thought of playing a game. So they're out there, they're pitching, they have a penalty kick, all this stuff. It's exciting for them. I can imagine they don't need an extra layer of stress. And when you have parents that are very invested, which is great that they're invested, that this means a lot to them. But when it gets to the point of it's excessive and now they're yelling at every play to their kid, they're trying to coach them on the sideline. It's easy to imagine this creating even more tension in their kids' mental game. And as we've talked about, the athletes who are more stressed out, who are burning out, are not going to perform as well as the ones who are having fun. So composure is key on the sideline. Elliott, I want to ask, is there ever a good time when I just picture like all these dads and moms just yelling like very loud. They're so into it. Is there ever a time for this when it makes sense, when it might be good for their kids?
No, and let me explain why. And let's use the lens of performance. So what do I mean by that? Those parents that are yelling, their ultimate goal, I would imagine, is for their kiddos to perform well on the field, on the court, on the ice. So this is how to get there. So therefore, what I'm saying aligns with your goals if you're one of those yellers. If the ultimate goal is performance, then we have to eliminate confusion. What do I mean by that? If I'm on the sideline and I'm coaching, hey, run up, oh, pass there, oh, shoot it, Billy. That is confusing for the student athlete. Why? Because we don't know what the game plan is. We're not in the locker room. We're not in practices every day. We don't know what the coach is saying. We don't know what the coach is sharing in terms of the strategy. So if I'm an athlete and I'm hearing my dad say something, what if it's the complete opposite of what the coach has instructed me to? Now I get confused. Now my performance goes down. So silence is key on the sidelines. Why? It reduces confusion. It improves performance.
This is so on point for what we were talking about earlier, wearing too many hats. When a parent puts on the coaching hat at a game when their kid already has a coach, yeah, lots of potential for confusion. And I remember a very specific moment when I was watching a team I was working with. From the other team, I saw a dad just giving it to his daughter on the ice, and she looked so confused. Like, I don't know if she could even hear him well, but she's trying to wrestle with what he's saying, with what she thinks is best, and with what coach is saying. So, yeah, I think it's safe to say that this is a good transition into the next piece of advice for on the sideline. If you're going to have that energy, that enthusiasm, don't put that energy into coaching. Put that into fun, displaying that this is fun and that the goal isn't to dominate the other team, it's to have fun and be proud of your own ability. And I think a very easy way to demonstrate that as a parent for their kid is smiling, having fun. Because I can't tell you how many parents I've seen are yelling and have the furrowed brow. That's not helping any kid enjoy the sport more and play better. So the parent can do something as simple as smile and have this subtle reminder of, hey, I love you no matter what. Don't worry. Don't beat yourself up over that last play or over what's going to happen. This can facilitate a much healthier mindset.
Beautifully said. I couldn't agree more. We've talked about it before, Gabe, of this idea of praising effort, praising communication, praising the controllables. So there is an argument for clapping over hustle plays, or when they dive hustling on the floor, or when they make that big run up on the soccer field on the outside. We can celebrate and recognize hustle.
Yep.
We can celebrate when our kiddo pulls up their teammate and gives them a high five. We can celebrate when there's teamwork and flow within the team on the field. The process, the controllables, the life lessons, that's where we can praise and clap and emphasize. And that is healthy and productive. We are focused on the process, not the results.
Yeah, I think when parents can go back to positive reinforcement when they're on the sideline, it's great. It's going to be healthy when they can do the clapping, do the cheering when they see something they like, but then there's no negative reinforcement of telling them not to do something. scolding them mid-game because they didn't look up when they passed, all that good stuff. So good point. Okay, let's transition into the action items of the episode. So mental skills and mindsets that parents can take away from this episode and use and model for their kids, both at games and at home. So the first kind of tool that I want to talk about is going back to this composure on the sideline. So thinking about how you can channel your energy and excitement for your kiddo's game into a more productive way. And one mental skill that is my favorite for all athletes that I work with is a mantra, and using a mantra as a way to refocus. And for those that don't know a mantra, you can think of it as one word or a phrase that you can say pretty quickly to yourself in your head or out loud. And what this will do is refocus your mindset onto something productive. For the parents on the sideline, if there's a mantra that you can think of that reminds you why you're here and how you can best help your kid performing right now, maybe that's remembering to smile. So just saying the word smile, or remembering the values that brought you into the sport was for fun. Using just a quick word or phrase to remind yourself how to act that is going to be the best for your kid is very powerful. And it's something you're going to use often. And after a while, using this mantra, it changes your brain in a way that the mode that you're trying to refocus to is going to be more natural in how you behave in future games. So using a mantra to facilitate this composure on the sideline for all those reasons we just talked about is going to be the first tool that I want to offer you guys. Elliott, is there anything that you want to add onto this type of tool to facilitate this composure on the sideline?
Yeah, I loved your comments, Gabe, about why we got our kiddo into student athletics in the first place. Is it to learn the life lessons like teamwork and being coachable and setting goals? If so, let's refocus on those long-term goals.
Perfect. So the second thing that I want to talk about in how parents can use mental skills and mindsets to basically boost the mental game for their kids is a motivation theory that ties to burnout, because burnout is when kids have this lack of joy in the game and a lack of motivation to keep playing, keep practicing. A very popular theory in sports psychology literature is the self-determination theory. What it talks about is 3 components that are necessary to foster and facilitate that leave kids feeling motivated. And not just kids, people. So if you know that these 3 factors are important for motivation, as a parent, you want to foster them. These 3 components are confidence, connection, and control. Competence is basically confidence in a certain skill or action. So while a kid might feel confident, they have what it takes to be successful as an athlete, they might not feel competent in a certain skill. Why competence is important for motivation is you can think about the athletes who aren't making a difference on the scoreboard night in, night out, where they're getting walked around by offensive players and they don't really have an influence on the game. It is tough to feel motivated, to keep coming back to practice, to be excited for games when you don't feel confident at the sport. So that's one of the 3 components for motivation that people want to foster. And this is a great thing that coaches can facilitate and foster. And then connection. This is basically an athlete feeling like they're connected to their teammates, coaches, the community of the sport, and anybody involved in their day-to-day efforts and games. So you can also think about the athlete who maybe they are competent, they have this skill set in the sport, yet they don't have any friends on the team, they don't get along with their coaches. This is going to be another reason that kids might feel unmotivated to put in the work for practices and be excited for games. Parents have some influence here by kind of making sure that their kids have a social system in their sport and they're not just going at it by themselves and not making any friends throughout the process. However, there's definitely a lack of control that parents have over the connections that their kids make in sports. Let's talk about the last component, control. And this is, I think, where parents have a lot of influence on their kids and the motivation they feel. When kids in their sport feel like they have control and autonomy over their outcomes, their skill development process, they're going to feel more motivated. And what this might look like is them having the option to choose where they play, to choose the drills that they want to practice, and any of these other decisions that put them more in the driver's seat of their development. Because when a kid is told what to do day in, day out, and they're not making any choices for themselves, they're going to be less invested. Elliott, do you have anything you'd like to add on this piece of managing burnout, fostering motivation in child athletes?
Yeah, I'm smiling over here, Gabe, when you talk about how when we don't have choices, we're not going to feel motivated. And I want to share a quick story that parents might appreciate that introduces a very sly strategy regarding choices and giving options. So years ago, I was a preschool teacher, believe it or not, in Arizona. And so I was going to grad school. I was learning about sports psych, and I had these little knee biters running around the classroom, right? Picture a chaotic preschool classroom. And I learned about how powerful options can be. And so here's an example. Hey, Billy, thanks for coming into the classroom. Now it's cleanup time. Would you like to clean up the blocks or go clean up the toys in this corner? And it's very sly, right? It's giving options. And even at that preschool level, that autonomy, uh, feeling like you're in charge is so powerful. And that is kind of a sly trick parents can use, is providing options to our student athletes.
I mean, it's so effective and so easy to use. And it's really easy to think about the difference in motivation between two kids when they're told to do one chore that they don't want to do, or when they're given the option of two chores they don't want to do. It still might be chores this kid is not fond of, but the fact that they get to choose makes it so much more tolerable. Are there any maybe more sport specific examples you can give that a parent might consider doing? Like, would this be going back to what I said, where they want to play, the colleges they're looking at? Any concrete examples come to mind?
Yeah, I know a lot of parents that I've worked with, they enjoy going to the park, going to the gym, and spending time playing with their kid. That one-on-one family time. Great, wonderful. Hey, Billy, show me a few drills that you want to work on. Let's set up the cones. Do you want to do this shooting drill or do you want to do this dribbling skill? And let's work on it together. And give options about what park activity they want to do.
And going back to an earlier piece of this conversation, being okay if they don't want to work on a concrete skill and just accepting that this is what they've chosen. And now they're in this mindset that they can drive this vehicle of development more than they were, more than the perception they had earlier. So they'll bring things to the table for you in the future of, hey, I actually do want to work on this now. So yeah, I think it's a really easy tool to facilitate this important component of motivation, that autonomy part.
And to piggyback, Gabe, on the analogy you're using with driving, man, it feels good to drive your own vehicle, right?
Yeah.
Everybody listening can understand that feeling. Don't we want to pass that along to our student athletes? Don't our teens deserve that feeling? What would happen with their motivation, their commitment to the season if they experienced that wonderful feeling?
The third mental skill slash mindset that I want to talk about is it goes back to a central tenet of sports psychology that is controlling the controllables. So this is thinking about my pregame routine and doing whatever I can do before games to get me amped up, as opposed to thinking about the other team and who's showing up and how good they're going to be. The difference is one thing I can totally control and do that's going to benefit my performance. The other one is ineffective thinking. Not only is it not helping my performance later on because I'm not doing these pregame routine components, but now I'm just stressing myself out even more. When we think about things that are out of our control, that is rooted in anxiety because anxiety is this lack of control, especially over the future. a lot of kids go through this ineffective thinking where they're thinking ahead, they're worried about what might not happen or what will happen, and they're not focused on what they can control. This is very common in pregame jitters, and I think a lot of parents are with their kids through pregame jitters. Maybe it's on the car ride, maybe it's getting them ready to play, maybe it's helping them get prepared, get their equipment on. This is a great opportunity to notice what they're thinking about, maybe talk to them and use the opportunity to shift their focus to what is within their control. And there are a lot of simple things like hydrating, back to the pregame routine, doing mental skills like visualization, breathing exercises that are all within your control. When you can teach your kid to focus on what is within your control, you're not only teaching them how to shift their focus to something more productive, but you're also benefiting their performance because they're going to be thinking more effectively. Anything to add here, Elliott, on control the controllables, helping kids shift their focus?
Yeah. Not only will it improve performance on the field, it's a wonderful life skill. And we're talking about setting up our young people for success in the long term. And student athletics is a wonderful vehicle to learn these life skills. So if I'm a parent and I want the best for my kiddo, and I know that sports is a way to learn and grow and practice in a environment that's not high consequence, not the end of the world, and I can connect through sports, then hell yeah, I'm going to teach control the controllable, right? What a perfect stage to learn this life lesson.
And I have not brought this up enough, that these mental skills and mindsets that are very impactful in sports are just as effective in real life. So learning to deal with that anxiety. Maybe it's just anxiety for a job interview or a tough test. And these skills and mindsets work similarly. So great point there. Life skills that are effective in sports. It's great. The fourth action item I want to discuss is how parents can facilitate a growth mindset in their kids. I think this has been a popular buzzword for a couple of years now, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. And just to quickly recap on what those are, somebody with a growth mindset is more willing to take risks, to fail, and to lose because they know that that is a guarantee in the game of sports, where if you want to get better, you have to lose, you have to be challenging yourself. So the opposite of this is the person with the fixed mindset. This is the person who thinks that the results are telling the whole story of this person's value, that they are their results. They don't want to take risks and challenge themselves because there's more of a chance for failure. And people with a fixed mindset have a very difficult time failing, which again is problematic because failure is a guarantee in sports. So how can we facilitate more of a growth mindset in our kids? One thing that I want to bring up, Elliott, in facilitating this growth mindset is praising kids for taking risks and challenges. So even if you're on the ride home with your kid after a tryout and it was kind of a reach maybe that they would make this team and they didn't make the team, giving them that praise, acknowledging that it wasn't easy to put themselves out there, and basically reinforce that this is what you're supposed to be doing and you didn't do anything wrong. What else can you add to this conversation about facilitating a growth mindset?
Yeah, Gabe, I would add that an effective strategy is to celebrate the process rather than overemphasize the result. So that's kind of fancy talk. Let me break that down. The process is Billy running up the soccer sidelines, hustling, and really giving his all to make that outside wing run. That's what we celebrate, the hard work, the challenge mindset of, hey, I'm going to help my team. I'm going to make this run. I'm going to put in the work. I'm going to give it a shot. Even if Billy didn't score that goal from the outside wing, we can still celebrate and recognize the process. And when we focus on the process, the results take care of themselves. I think I read that on your website. Am I wrong?
No, you're not. Yeah. I mean, elevate your mental game and the results will fall into place.
There it
So
is.
a lot of people are tempted to think about that outcome. However, that's going to hurt the outcome that you do end up receiving. And if you focus on the process, like Elliott said, you will get better outcomes in the end, even though you're not focused on it. So I think it's important for parents and even coaches to pick out those little things, like you said, Elliott, like, oh, you ran really hard up the sideline. And it might have been just such a minor play. This kiddo probably forgot about it instantly. But if that's what you start signaling, that you're reinforcing, that you're showing praise for, that you're showing that you're proud of for this effort over ability and outcomes, it's going to make a big difference. And that's what they're going to be thinking about. They're more naturally going to think about the process, which is such a big skill that athletes and people can learn.
Absolutely. And Gabe, let's take it a next layer and break it down even more. What are we talking when we say process? What are we talking about? Well, like I said, the hustle up the right wing. It could even be communication on defense.
Mm-hmm.
It could be helping up a teammate when they're down. It could be making eye contact with the coach in the huddle. These are the little controllable process steps that we're talking about here. So catch your child effectively executing the process and celebrate those mini wins.
Yeah, great point. When I think about the process, it's those fundamental building blocks to success. And I think one very minor thing you mentioned that is important is making eye contact with the coach, showing that they're engaged, that they're focused, that they're listening. And I'm sure the coach appreciates that focus. So yeah, picking out those pieces of the process when you can and showing praise is going to go a long way in facilitating a healthier growth mindset in kids. The last component of this growth mindset facilitating piece is acknowledging progress in your kids' goals or that they're making towards their goals if they fail to do so. So if you notice that they are getting better, that they are improving at a certain skill, but the kid is not giving themselves any praise, they're ignoring the progress that they're making, or they just simply don't see it. And they're kind of taking after this negative headspace a lot of people live in nowadays, where they don't want to give themselves praise over the progress that they're making, the development. So when a parent can notice, hey, you are getting better. I know you don't see it, but if I see it and I can point it out to you, maybe you will have a healthier mindset and not be beating yourself up as much. That can be big in facilitating kids to actually take note when they're getting better and be proud of the work ethic and progress that they're making. Anything you want to add before we wrap up this growth mindset talk?
Yeah, Gabe, let's give a practical example to our listeners about what we're referring to. So if I'm Sally and I'm a softball player and I'm working in the cages with my dad really hard week after week about maybe letting the ball travel, for example, and hitting it to the right-hand side. If I'm a right-handed batter, kind of going off field, right? And let's say I see Sally do that in a game and Sally hits a real sharp ball right on the nose and it goes right to the second baseman and Sally gets out. When we talk about process and outcome, parents can celebrate and recognize that sharply hit ball to the right-hand side, and we can praise that effort because we know she's been working on that. So even though the play is an out, we can still celebrate the process. And that is an effective way to build and foster growth mindset.
I love that example. And I started smiling because halfway through, I was like, oh, Sally's getting out. She's going to get out here. But like you said, it's still important to pick up on just because the outcome was an out doesn't mean there isn't anything we can pick up on and praise and reinforce. And I'm sure Sally might be tempted to go back to basics and go back to what she shouldn't do. But having that voice in your head of saying, hey, you did everything right, or you did these things right, even though it didn't end up well. Keep at it. Stay with the process. So I love that example.
And as a parent, don't we want Sally to continue that work, continue to work on that particular skill of hitting it the other way? Don't we want Sally to be motivated to hit the cages again the weekend to continue to practice that? And if Sally feels so defeated, guess what? She's not going to go to the cages with that anymore. So we have to encourage her. Hey, I saw a mini step. I saw you go in the right direction. Let's not forget the mini victories.
Mm-hmm. These tools are very connected, because this goes back to the previous tool of reminding them of their competence in self-determination theory of motivation. So if you can be that voice of, hey, you are playing better, the outcome, ignore the outcome for now, your process improved. You're basically signaling the competence piece and reminding them they're getting better, they have an influence on this game. The last tool, last mindset and mental skill that we want to talk about is improving the post-game routines of their kids after games. And I especially think about the car rides home and the conversations that happen. I want to use this time to talk about a quick story of when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and I was just a few years into playing hockey. I was playing goalie, and my brother, who's a couple years older than me, his team needed a sub, and his team was better than the league that I was playing in. So they needed a goalie. So I was basically stepping up a league and playing on my brother's team, and I was super nervous because I was, again, taking a risk of I could let in double-digit goals, and that's never fun. What ended up happening was we won, but the score was like 10-7. So my team with my brother, we scored a ton of goals and won despite me letting in 7 goals, which is a lot. A lot of goalies don't feel proud after a game when you let in 7 goals. However, I was just a happy-go-lucky kid. I couldn't care less that I let in 7 goals because I won this game in this higher league. So I was happy. However, on the car ride home, my dad took it upon himself to still coach me, to point out what I could have done better in this game. Yet the headspace that I was in was I just wanted to celebrate this win that I was very stressed out about with this game that I didn't think I'd be able to compete. So I got instantly in a bad mood because I kind of lashed out at him and went, I don't want to talk about how to get better. I just want to enjoy this. And it might have been a wake-up call for my dad, for him to go like, okay, maybe I should pick my times better when I should be the critic. And I think it's just a great lesson in general, though, for parents to understand there are certain times when you want to put that coaching hat on, and there are certain times when you just want to let your kid enjoy whatever they're enjoying, or go or experience whatever emotions they're experiencing. In my case, this was more positive, but there are going to be other cases when it's going to be negative, and they still don't want to have that coaching mindset, or just the parents want to take note of their questions that they ask after games, even more so given what their kid is going through. Where are you at, Elliott, with the post-game questions? I know this is something you also hold close to your heart.
I do hold it close to my heart, Gabe. And the reason is because I want the families that I work with to be happy and healthy. I want the family dynamics to be positive, and I want to create lifelong memories, and parents to enjoy, and student athletes to enjoy those moments together. So that's where I'm coming from. And I want to emphasize the point you made in your beautiful story, Gabe, of timing. Timing is everything. So one strategy I suggest to my parents is pause. Pause until the dinner table. Why? Because that way, Billy's gonna have a full belly. He's gonna be showered. He's gonna be out of those sticky, sweaty clothes. And the timing of that is everything. Don't you think you're gonna have a much more receptive student athlete at the dinner table with a full stomach? Don't you think the conversation's gonna go more smoothly? don't you think you're going to have a healthier relationship? And so timing is everything.
Is there any argument to be made of maybe it is more effective to immediately have that conversation after the game when things are fresh? Or do you find in your practice that mostly these kids want to have these conversations later, not right after their game?
Well, when we talk about human learning and the literature in that area, without getting too technical, immediate feedback, there is an argument for that, right? When we're working on a skill, that immediate feedback, that immediate coaching is effective. However, the emotionality of a youth brain trumps that in my experience. What do I mean by that? Emotions run high after the game. After you finish that 100-meter dash, guess where your heart rate is? Guess where your emotionality is at? Not in a space to learn. We are too amped up to receive that feedback oftentimes. And so, yes, there is an argument for immediate feedback. However, with the teen student athlete, let's be mindful of the timing.
I think there's an important discrepancy between the skill development and more broad game debriefing. And I think parents are more in the space of let's debrief the game, where the parent might pick out a few different plays that they want to talk about, whether it's good or bad, and more of this general, how did they feel? How is it going? Talking about the teammates. And the coach is more in that specific skill development. So, yeah, I think repeating kind of a disclaimer that we had at the beginning of the episode, the post-game questions is something that is going to be much more unique to each relationship between parent and youth athlete. And going back to tool number 2, once again, managing burnout, those 3 components of motivation. One of those is control. Why not ask your kid, hey, when do you want to talk about games? Do you want to talk about them in the car ride, or is it too fresh? You want to disconnect for a little bit? Or is that when you're very excited to talk about your game? Put them in the driver's seat, and I bet you're going to get a better answer than you would if you were just guessing or going off of what you thought was best and what you wanted to do.
Love it. Ask them, and the conversation will go much more smoothly. A lot more healthy relationships.
Communication is key. Let's recap the action items that parents can take away from this episode. So again, mental skills and mindsets that parents can use at home and at games to facilitate a healthier, more effective mental game for their kids. So number 1, composure on the sideline. Using your energy, your excitement, and channeling that into something that's going to make the kids feel more excited to play, happier to play, and less stressed out. So you can use a mantra to remind yourself of the values, why you got into this sport with your kid, or remind yourself how to behave. So maybe just telling yourself smile, put that in your mind. Having this type of mindset, this type of composure on the sideline is going to rub off on your kid, and they're going to feel less stressed out as a result. Number 2, helping your kids manage burnout. And this is going back to the self-determination theory of motivation. So by fostering competence, connection, and control in your kids, you're doing a great job in maintaining their motivation and their joy for a sport. Number 3 is reminding them to focus on what is within their control, especially during these pregame jitters and when they might be thinking about or talking about things that are out of their control. Things out of their control could be the refs, the weather, the other team. Shift their focus when necessary to the process, the pregame routine, communication, body language, all this stuff within their control. Number 4 is this concept of facilitating a growth mindset in your kids. Ways that you can do this involve praising them for taking risks and persevering through challenges, emphasizing effort over outcome. So if they put in the right effort, if they are focused on the process, and even if the outcome isn't what you wanted, still showing praise, the positive reinforcement for what they did do well. And lastly, acknowledging progress that they're making towards their goals, even if they don't see the progress that they're making. Lastly, on this list is refining your system of post-game questions or the post-game routine in general. So picking the right time when to ask certain questions. And a great way to figure out the most effective system is asking your kid, when do you want to talk about this stuff? Do you have a preference to talk about and debrief your game right away on their car ride home, the next day at dinner? This is going to be an example of how you determine your unique system and how to make it most effective. Wrapping all that up, Elliott, is there anything that you'd like to add before we get into the end here?
I just want to thank you, Gabe, for the opportunity to talk shop. I can't think of a better way to spend my morning than helping families and talking about student athletics. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And I understand you have a workbook on your website that is geared towards student athletes that they can use and come away with mental skills and mindsets.
Yeah, it's a wire-bound workbook. Chapters include mental toughness, confidence, life skills. Basically, the student athlete writes in each page and learns a practical, fun mental toughness strategy. You fill out the page in 30 seconds, you flip to the next page. It is the perfect gift for your student athlete.
I also love that this is like a self-paced workbook that it's not going to feel like a class in the sense of you have workbook time 20 minutes a day or something like this. It's at their own pace. I'm sure when they're feeling a burst of motivation, but they don't know what to do, this workbook sounds like a great tool that they can use. So Elliott, I wanted to thank you again for coming on and sharing your wisdom and how parents can facilitate a better relationship with their kids and help them succeed and fulfill their potential. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Gabe. I invite parents to check out my website, portlandsportspsychology.com. You can find the workbook there or on Amazon, $30, and your teen gets 30 mental toughness techniques.
Beautiful. Thanks again, Elliott.
Yeah, thanks. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening. We hope you took something valuable away from this episode. Stay in the loop by following the Sports Psychology of on your go-to podcast platform and find clips of each episode's best segments on YouTube, as well as Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Do you want to take your mental game to the next level? Try out one-on-one sports psychology coaching with me, Gabe Zellico, by visiting my website, zellicoperformance.com. You can book a free intro call where we'll discuss your goals, obstacles to success, and determine if we'd be a good fit to move forward. You can also email me directly at thesportspsychology@gmail.com regarding one-on-one coaching or the podcast. Links to social media, my website, and email are all in the description. Thank you again for listening.